Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you today here. We today have two talks, and we start with the first talk about Angular. So they are both about Angular framework. And first talk about next generations of Angular applications. And our speaker is Nicolas Frizzarin. Let's meet him.
Hi. Everybody hear me? Yeah? Cool. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming to this presentation. I'm so glad to be with you today, and I hope you have a good day without production issue, not like me. But yeah, I'm very happy to be with you. So today I'm going to speak about Angular 14 and more specifically about the new feature of this version and their impacts on our application and their architecture. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Nicolas Frizzarin. I am a developer advocate and engineering manager at Sphere Luxembourg. Come from Metz in France, and I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies and an OpenJS Foundation member. So in few words, I really love contributing to the web and Node.js ecosystem and sharing my knowledge through speaking or writing articles, giving training. Yeah, and just a few words about my company. So Sphere is a consulting company based in Luxembourg. So here, France and Belgium. Currently we are hiring, so don't hesitate to apply if you want. Okay, so what will we see today? As I said, I'm going to show you the new feature that brings Angular 14. And as you can imagine, I am going to speak about standalone components. So this is the biggest feature of this version. And the fact of introduced this feature, the routing is significantly impacted, and I'm going to show you how. And in addition of these two amazing features, Angular introduced a new development pattern called the composition pattern that we can already find in Vue.js thanks to the composition API. We go to see typed form, and more specifically how types can improve the developer experience when we write some forms in Angular, to finally focus on quick tips and next feature of Angular. So, standalone components is a way to say goodbye to ng modules, but in fact, standalone components is a new way to create components. And these components aim to simplify the rating of components and ng modules, and also aim to make ng modules optional. So Paweł Kozłowski, who is an Angular team member, writes in its standalone RFC, given the central role of ng modules in Angular, it's hard to reason about components, directive, and pipes. And this is very true, because the whole ecosystem of Angular revolves around this notion. So application and libraries revolve around the notion of ng modules. And for the moment, an application without ng modules can't even start. So, question is how to solve these problems, because for me it's a big problem. So before this version, Angular was built around around 4 big modules. First one is the root module. This module is your main module of your application, so this is the most important module of your application. And because this is the main module of your application, this module contains the first component to display and generally providers to that must be used to the whole application. Second module is the core module. So core module contains the most common provider to the whole application. It also contains guards, interceptors, and components that is parts of the application body, like header, footer, or navbar. Another important module is the feature module, because feature module is the functionalities of your application. It's mainly a view of your application. And for more optimization, feature module are lazy loaded. Yeah, and because the lazy loading is done by module, it's very important to create another module called the navigation module for each feature module, and this navigation module contains a subrouting configuration. Okay, and last module, this is the biggest one, because shared module contains all is shared to the whole application. So shared module contains the common modules, or the most often used modules, called common module or reactive forms module. And shared module contains also shareable and customizable components, directive, and pipes. And also components that exposed by your design system library, like Angular Material, ng-Zoro, ng-Bootstrap, or anything else. Okay. So, wow, lot of modules and files just to display a to-do list example or a simple hello world application. So yeah, too much file, and it's important to understand that before this release, Angular was the only web framework that the components, pipe, and directive are not unit reuse. So the fact of having given the central role of ng modules have huge impacts on the developer experience. And the first one is when you want to try these technologies and just display a hello world example, you must understand the whole logics behind the ng module. So you must understand what is important, what is exported, and what are declaration or providers array. So a lot of logic, a lot of logic to understand. And second impact is on the component itself. So reading a component is not enough on its own. So you must read, because the dependency of your component is not on the same file. You must read the ng modules that import the component to understand the whole business logic code of your application. Third impact, bootstrapping. Bootstrapping, very too complex. Yeah, too complex. 4.5 just to display a simple hello world. So index.html file, main.ts file, the module file, and the component file. So too many files. And bootstrapping is easy to misuse. And last impact is on feature module, because there is no tree shaking on ng modules, components, directive, and pipes. So, and because the shared module will be imported in each feature module, your feature module can grow very, very quickly for a few things. So, a solution was designed. So, single component, single directive, single pipe as module was designed by Lars Bring-Girup Nielsen. Long name. Yeah, and the goal of this proposal is to place the components and the NG modules to the same file in a unitary irrespective way. So when you create a component with this pattern, when you create a component, you will automatically create on the same file a NG modules. Okay, so less files, but a lot of modules. So some troubles we have seen in the previous slides as is resolved with this pattern. So it reduces the file number, but we have a huge number of modules. The bundles will be reduced because the NG modules must contain only what needs the components to work properly. And so the logic of unit reuse is unblocked. So, based on this pattern, standalone components, welcome to the feature of Angular. So, to create a standalone component, it's very easy because now we have a new property on the metadata of the component annotation, and this property is standalone. So, if you set this property to true, your component is a standalone component. If you set it to false, your component is a basic component, and by default, this property is set to false. Okay, so it's important to understand when you create a standalone component, you make a promise. You make a promise that the components can evolve without any dependencies or just its own dependencies. Okay? So when you write a standard, so it's very simple to declare a standalone component. So when you write a standalone component, in fact, you write virtual modules. Okay? So this modules is called virtual because this module is created when your application is built. Okay? And this module imports the associated components and exports it. Okay? And like any other module, you must import what the component needs to work properly. And that's why you have a new property in the metadata components annotation. So this property is import, and this property take as a value an array of modules, an array of standalone components, or an array of a mix of both. Okay? But this property is only available if you set the property standalone to true. So the addition of standalone components have huge impacts on the whole ecosystem of Angular application, and the first impact is on the module injector. Because there is no module now, it does not make sense anymore to speak about module injector. So now it's better to speak about environment injector. Okay? So standalone components can simplify the bootstrap, and as I said, the introduction of the standalone components, the routing have new possibilities. Okay? So, as I said, bootstrapping is easier now. Okay, so you can now bootstrap on a standalone components, and you can bootstrap on a standalone components thanks to the bootstrap application function. And this function take as the first argument the standalone component to which the application must bootstrap, and as a second argument a configuration object having for the moment only one property called providers. Okay, so this property allows us to register global provider for the application, and that's all. So yeah, another thing which is very important is how can we register some provider that are exposed by a module. like reactive forms, like routing module or HTTP client module. So when you import these modules, you import the HTTP client provider. So now without modules, how can we do that? Okay, so now it's very easy because Angular gives us a new helper function called import providers, and this function takes as only arguments a module that expose provider. So this function takes care of registering your provider in the whole application. Okay, so in the future, Angular gives us a lot of helper function to avoid using this helper function. So maybe an helper function to perform the registering of the provider of the HTTP client module could be a function named HTTP clients, but it's just an ID. Okay, this function does not exist for the moment in the Angular 14. So now routing have a lot of new possibilities, and all these possibilities are very crazy. So when you create standalone components, it's normal to ask yourself a lot of questions. So how to navigate to a standalone components, how to lazy load a standalone components, and how, better yet, how is it possible to, I don't know, load a root file that contains a subrouting configuration, and each root of this subrouting configuration navigate to a standalone components. So is it possible to do that? And the answer is yes. Yes for all the questions. So now an Angular application can lazy load a standalone components, can lazy load a root file that contains a subrouting of configuration navigation. You can also lazy load a module and navigate to a component or a standalone component. So obviously, what was possible before is still possible now without any impacts. So this is very great, because this seems that you can make a cohabitation between ng modules and standalone components. So how to lazy load a standalone components? It's very easy, because now we have a new property on the root configuration. So this property is load components, and like its twin sister, this property takes as a value a function, and this function must import the standalone components. So in other words, in technical words, this function must return a type of standalone components, or a promise of type of standalone components, or an observable of type of standalone components. Okay, so now we have declare the routing configuration, but how can we register it? Very easy, because Angular gives already us a new helper function called provider routes, and this function takes care of registering your routing configuration in your application, but take also care of registering the provider exposed by the routing module. Sometimes it's very, sometimes we need to import, sometimes we need to import subrouting configuration. We must write child routes or subrouting. And if you don't want to use ng modules, you must create a root file. And this root file must export your subrouting configuration, and each root of this subrouting configuration must navigate to a standalone components. So all are standalone components if you want to do that. So now how can we lazy load a root file? Very easy, because you can use the property load children, okay, as you could do it before, but instead of imported your module files, you import your root file. Okay, so if you want to use module, you import the module files, but if you want to use the your root file, you must import the root file. Okay, now another problem. Module does not exist anymore. So how can we register a provider for a specific feature? Because now it's not possible anymore, because module injector does not make any sense and does not exist anymore. So we must register now the provider in the environment injector. And to do that, the routing have a new property, and this property is provider. Provider take as a value an array of provider you want to register for a specific environment injector. So in this piece of code, I register the user service, okay? And this user service is registered to the user environment injector. So it's quite easy. And now, because I register these providers in the user environment injector, I can use it in my login components and details components. So just a few words about this example. It's not necessary that all these components are standalone components, okay? This functionality works with classic components too. Last feature, but for me, it's the best feature of this of the routing. It's the new guard called CanMatch. So CanMatch is a magical and powerful guard. Why it's magical? It's magical because it gives us to make a choice between two components to display for a same pace. So in this example, I have created a to-do v2 guard. Okay, this guard is a CanMatch guard, and if this guard returns true, the to-do page v2 components will be loaded and displayed instead of the to-do page components. But if the to-do v2 guard returns false, the to-do page components will be loaded and displayed instead the to-do v2 page components. Okay, and another amazing feature is the replacement of the CanActivate and the CanLoad guard. So let's take an example. Imagine you have an application, and in this application you have created a sign-in feature module. Okay, so you want to prevent to go to this sign-in components if the user is already logged. Okay, so for the first time when your application is launched, your user is not logged, so it go to the sign-in feature module. Okay, so you enter on the CanLoad guard, and the CanLoad guard says, "Oh, it's okay. User is not logged. You can go to this path." So the user enter its credential, and he navigates to the dashboard. Now imagine your user click on the back arrow of your browser. What happened? Sorry. What happened? The user navigate to the sign-in component. And why? Because your sign-in feature module is already lazy loaded, so your feature module is in the browser, so you don't enter in the CanLoad guard. And that's why you must create a CanActivate guard on the subrouting configuration of this feature module. And with CanMatch, it's not necessary anymore to do that. You can just create CanMatch and we will enter always in this guard. Okay, so less boilerplating. Very cool. So, as I said, Angular introduced a new development pattern called the composition. Okay, so the composition is a way to create high reusable code So in Vue.js, it's possible thanks to the composition API, but in Angular, it will be possible thanks to the injection. Okay, so injection is very important for Angular because we can do a lot of things with injection. So before the Angular version 14, you have an inject function, and this inject function allow us to avoid writing constructor, and take as an argument the token you want to provide. Okay, you want to inject. But there is a problem with this function. This function works only on an injection context. So it works only on a provider. So now if you want to use this function in a component, this will not work because you are not in an injection context. You are outside an injection context. And for that, Angular will throw an error and say, hey, inject function can be called here. Things to use a constructor instead. Okay? But now with Angular 14, it works now. And it's very cool because now we can use the inject function in a component. Okay? So you can use the inject function at the initialization of the components. And this have a lot of impacts. First impact, as you can imagine, composition pattern is unlocked. And guard can become a function. And this is very cool. Because before, we used class only for one thing. Sometimes in our guards, we need some providers. We need routes. We need activated routes. A lot of things are your own providers. And to do that, you must create a class to inject your provider because in a guard, you are not in an injection context. You are outside. So now, thanks to the injection function working outside an injection context, you can transform your guard in a function and declare it as you do before. So this is awesome. This is a big feature. So let's have example with composition. Okay, so imagine now you have an application and you want to retrieve a URL parameter. Okay, so in Angular, it's always the same code. The only change is the name of the parameter. So now, a good practice in architecture must be to create in a shared folder a composition folder, and in this composition, I will create a root.composable.ts file. And in this file, I will export all helper functions that have interaction with the routing. Okay, so here I create a getParams function, and this getParam function take as an argument the name of the parameter. I inject the activated route to retrieve my URL parameter, and I return it. And how can I use it in components? Very easy. At the initialization of my own components, I create an ID user, and I set it to get params. This is very cool because now it's very easy to respect the strict rule in TypeScript. Guard example. Okay, so now imagine you will remove the class and create a function. So here I want to prevent the navigation to the sign-in components. So I want to prevent the navigation if my user is already logged. So for that, I just create a function already logged. I inject my user service, and my user service return my user. If my user is already logged, I redirect my my user to the home page, but if my user is not logged, I return true. And we can do that with the inject function. So this is very cool. Cool, right? Very cool. Yeah. But until now, I only show you the using of the inject function at the initialization of your components. But it remains one question very important. Is it possible to inject a provider during the runtime? Okay? And the answer is yes, the answer is yes. So it's very cool because thanks to the environment injector and thanks to the run-in context function, you can inject a provider during the runtime. So the run-in context function take a callback function as an argument, and in this function, you can do what you want. All the business logic you want, you can inject all the provider you want. So this is very amazing. Just there is one restriction. Okay. Inject function works synchronously. So if you use the inject function with an async callback, it will not work. And if you use the inject function just behind a wait point, it will not work too. Sorry for that. So forms. Now we can avoid stupid mistakes, and this is very cool. So what's the goal of introduced typings in forms? So goals is form will be more robust. So because types improve robustness. So now, and thanks to this, the developer experience is very improved. Okay, because now developer can catch earlier and easier error. So no need to wait the build of your application to catch a types error. Okay, now you can already catch it thanks to the auto-completion. And but introduced types have some impacts. Okay, so just imagine you want to add a control and remove a control dynamically in a form group with types is not possible anymore. And that's why Angular create new API to have this feature. So why the developer experience is improved? All methods on form are typed, and it's very nice because no finished magical string. And so you have a better auto-completion in your TypeScript file. You have also a better auto-completion in Angular in your HTML file thanks to Angular language services. So now create forms is very easier and it's very fast. So the transformation is very easy because now all form control, all form group, and all form array class take a generic type. So in this piece of code, you can see a form control that is typed to string or null, and this is the default behavior of types. Okay, and why null? Because when you reset a forms, automatically Angular sets the control value to null. Okay, so if you want to change this behavior, you can change it by passing a configuration object, and in this configuration object set the property non-nullable value to true. Quick note about form array. Form array now are strictly typed, so all the control in the form array must have the same type. If it's not the case, Angular will throw an error. So sometimes it's very important to keep flexibility, especially in our forms, because sometimes we want to add or register or remove control dynamically. And that's why the form record class exists. So the form record class is exactly the same of a form group class, but all the control in the form record class must have the same type. Okay, so this can be very helpful if you use your form group as a map to which you add or remove controls dynamically. At this moment, it's very complicated to types, and that's where the form record is very useful. Okay, so it can be handy when you want to, I don't know, when you want to display a list of checkbox, maybe your user want to add or remove language they understand or don't understand when they register. And for this use case, form record is perfect. So a lot of change in forms. So maybe we can be afraid to migrate, but don't worry, it will be very easier because the CLI do all the things. Yes, he do all the things for you. Okay, so now when you migrate, when you migrate to an Angular 14 version, the CLI migrates respectively the form control, form group, and form array to the untyped form control, untyped form group, and untyped form array. Okay, untyped form array, untyped form group, or untyped form control is just an alias for form control type to any. Okay, so now you have no excuse to migrate your application in Angular 14 to use this amazing feature, to stop to use some workaround thanks to the CanMatch guard. So no excuse anymore. Let's now go to the quick tips and the future of Angular. Revolution is very near in this framework. So how can I migrate easily my application? Very, very easy. First step, update component to standalone components thanks to the standalone property set to true. Then remove the shared module and import what the component needs thanks to the imports property. Update your routing configuration and don't forget to change your bootstrapping of your application. Use the bootstrap function to bootstrap on your standalone components. And because you can now do a cohabitation between ng modules and standalone components, in bonus, you can migrate, guard, and refactor all of your application. Okay? For library designer like me, it's very easy to migrate and don't break anything. Okay? So first, update component to standalone components and update secondary entry point module. So in this module, remove the declaration array, import the standalone components, and please don't forget to export it because if you don't export it, it will not work. So, potential feature of Angular. Zoneless. Yes, no need the zone anymore. More granularity in the reactivity. This is very nice, okay, because currently we have just the change detection to change that. And maybe an alternative to RxJS thanks to the signals library. So in this piece of code, this is just a try of me, okay? Just it's not yet for the production, it's a POC, okay? So don't use it in production. So I create a count variable, a double variable. A count variable is initial thanks to the use signal function. I pass the initial value 0, and double is computed. So when counts change, computed double change. Okay, and I use the effect function that takes a callback function in arguments, and in this function you can do all what you want. Okay, just an effect function. Okay, little things. Maybe Webpack will be replaced by Vite. Vite is the module bundler for the moment. Okay, it's very rapid and no code configuration. That's why a lot of people like Vite. So it exists a POC. This POC is in production. Okay, it's analog. Yeah, it's analog application. So analog is a framework that bootstrap an Angular application with Vite bundler instead of Webpack. Okay. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter with at Nikos4054, on LinkedIn with Nicolas Frizzarin. And sorry for my bad English accents. I'm French, but currently I'm working on it. Thanks everybody, and take care.
Yeah, I think now it's time for questions. So actually, I have first question to you. How many of you tried Angular? Okay, good. Okay, we have some of you. So anyone has a question about new features? New versions of Angular? Or maybe future of Angular? No? Or maybe someone loves React and want to say something? Yeah, question. I will bring the microphone.
Thanks. Hello. Do you have any measurement impact of the performance regarding the bootstrapping?
Yes. So currently, when you migrate an application with Angular 14, you have no performance impact. Okay, you have currently exactly the same performance. Okay, just keep in mind the bundle is reduced, but performance are the same.
The bundle size is lower than the previous versions?
Yeah, because now if you create an Angular application with best practice in Angular 14, no shared module, okay? Just create simple standalone components, or all is standalone components, okay? And all standalone components must import only the dependency that it make works properly. But I just want to say ng modules are not deprecated. Okay, it's just optional. So it's very important to keep in mind that ng modules now is used to group some functionalities. So if you check Angular code, currently common module exists or always exist. Okay, but all the directives exported by these common modules are standalone directive. And why? Because sometimes you just want to use ng if. Okay, so at this moment, it's very important to just import the ngIf directive. But if your page use ng4, ngIf, async pipe, dat pipe, etc., use the command module because it's exactly the same.
Okay, thanks. Another question regarding the replacing the RxJS.
Yeah.
Just so the naming, the use prefix.
Yeah.
And it's refer to the hooks in React?
Yeah, so if you use seniles, it's just an ID. I see it in Twitter with Powell, and Powell says maybe we can use seniles. So I just poke if it's possible. It's just my poke, okay? So it's not yet for production, and I love writing code in Vue.js too. So I like this library because use is a naming convention in composition in Vue. But yes, it's exactly the same as React hooks, in fact. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So we have a big QR code. Apparently, I heard recently that it's called QR code. So we have little elephants. PHP elephants, but you know, from our sponsor, they're pretty funny. So if you like elephants, you like nature, especially PHP elephants, please feel free to grab some. Please join the Discord Luxembourg.js. It was a dream of mine to have some sort of a chat where you can go into and ask people around you about some help. For example, like Nicolas, I'm going to this standalone components, and usually how people are talking, you know, in Teams, oh, I'm trying this new feature. Oh, it's shit. And you're like, did you read the documentation? Oh, come on, who is reading the documentation, right? I'm reading it as well, because, you know, from other side, 2 hours of debugging can always save you 5 minutes of reading the documentation. So please join the Discord. We'll be there. You can share photos, but only legal ones. Exchange messages and see you online. But before seeing you online, we'll see you there for a drink and for questions and mingle.
Yeah, just want to say a big thank you to our technical support today from Viborg. Guys, you're amazing. I saw it already second time how you do it. It's really cool. So guys, yes, Discord, about Discord. So we just created it. I will then share in all our previous chats about this in Twitter, of course. So Twitter usually it's the like official way of announce things, and meetups.com. I think you already know about this group. Discord will be more about different chatting, questions. Also maybe, because we have channels there, so we will create more and we will put rules of community there as well, about respect, others, and etc. So we just created it and we will fill it. Yes, you can share all your thoughts. Maybe even we already created a channel for hiring. So if some of you needs a colleague in your company or you are searching for the team, you can write it in special channel. So no problems with that. And yes, so thank you. Thanks for our speakers for your talks. Cool. And guys, it's not necessary to prepare such a long talk. So if you want to start with 15 minutes talk. We can help you. Just come to us with ideas, and we can help you to present it. And then we will have record after this, and you will be on YouTube. And this you can present to someone that it's your work. So it really helps with the work. For example, if you want to become a Google developer expert, you need this. So I never had my list of talks before I applied for this for GDE. And then they asked me, no, you need to prepare the whole list of all your talks. And now I have it. So, thank you. And let's go with funny part.